Hey everybody, and welcome to the third video of the course. In this video we're going to cover two big topics. The first won't take very long, it's just tying up some loose ends from last time. I'll define what these terms mean. It's just a little manipulation you can do with variables. And then the bulk of our time we will spend by defining new data types bool, character, and string. So let me just remind you what we did last time. In the previous video, we defined the data types int, long, float, and double. Int and long are used to store whole numbers. Float and double are used to store decimals, so not whole numbers. These four data types are numeric. In other words, they are used to create storage spaces or boxes, however you want to think about it, for numbers. So those data types are used to create a box in which you will place a number. But of course, you may be interested in storing things besides numbers. You may be interested in storing English, for example, English sentences. So in this video, we will turn our attention to other data types, in particular these three: type bool, type char, and type string. These three data types will allow you to store other things besides numbers that you may be interested in. So first, let's start by tying up some loose ends from last time. I want to first show you something called, well, it's just called, I'm not sure there's a technical term for it, but just declaring multiple things at once. So if you want to create three integer variables named a, b, and c, you could write these three lines of code if you want: int a, int b, int c. Of course, if you want to declare more than three variables, if you want to declare 20 integer variables, it becomes tedious to write int all the time. So you can actually condense all of those lines of code like this: int a, comma b, comma c, and then semicolon to end the command. So you can just condense declarations into a single statement if you want to. Okay, so suppose you're writing a program involving circles and you want to use the number pi. You might introduce pi into your code like this, these two lines of code. Create a variable called pi, and it needs to be float because pi is a decimal, so either float or double. It can't be int. And then you could tell the computer that pi is 3.14159, whatever approximation you want to use. So you can actually condense these two lines of code into a single line like this. So you're creating the pi variable, the variable you're calling pi, and giving it a value at the same time. This is called initialization. So you can declare multiple variables in the same statement if you want to, and you can give them values when you declare them if you want to. So something like this you can do in your code. You can create three variables at once and give them all values at the same time if you want to, all inside of a single statement. So this just saves time when you're writing code. It just makes the code more streamlined and just takes you less time to type things. Okay, so now on to the main portion of this video, the new data types. The first data type I want to introduce is the Boolean data type, and it's called bool for short, but the technical term is Boolean. So an integer variable is a storage space for any whole number. Not too many digits, of course, but in principle, I suppose you could try putting any number in there. And therefore, an integer variable can take on a whole number value, either positive or negative. A double variable is a storage space for any decimal, and therefore can take on a decimal value. By contrast, these two things are numeric, right? By contrast, a Boolean variable takes on only one of two values, either true or false. Okay, so an int variable can be the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, the number -5, the number -10, etc. There are many, many values you can put inside of an integer storage space. There are only two values you can put inside of a Boolean storage space: true or false. That's all. So to declare a Boolean variable, use bool. So by initialization, you can write things like this: bool my variable. I'm starting by initializing it to true, or you can initialize it to false. Okay, so Boolean variables are variables that can only have two values, either true or false. Why would you need to use this? because it's not clear from the definition that this is even useful. And the answer is basically, well, we'll use it later. For now, though, just imagine writing a program in which the user is supposed to enter either a yes or a no. So Y for yes, N for no. Maybe because you asked the user a yes or no question. The user, of course, doesn't have to enter Y or N when they're typing on the keyboard. They could type an R, they could type a 7, whatever. So what you would like is some sort of check variable to make sure they're entering either a Y or an N, because those are the only valid inputs. So what you could do is you could create a Boolean variable to keep track of whether or not they're entering something valid. So your code would go something like this. If my Boolean input check variable is true, then the user gave me a Y or an N and I can move on. If the Boolean input check variable is false, though, that means they entered something bad, so the input wasn't valid, and we would have to ask the user again. Maybe the user mistyped. So basically, Boolean variables are good when you have just two options for something. Either they entered something valid, or they didn't. So in this case, you could use a Boolean variable to keep track of those two outcomes. Just for example. Okay, so we're not going to use this for a while, but here's a little introduction to it. Okay, the next data type is type character, or char for short. Char is a data type for storing single characters. So this data type is used for storing a single letter D, or the percentage symbol percentage, or a space, that's a character, things like this. To initialize or to use character, you have to use single quotes. So you can write something like this: car, my car is D. So the letter D. This data type is useful for many reasons, and we'll see the uses as we move through the course. It's particularly useful when parsing through a string of English character by character. So imagine going through a sentence and looking for vowels, just for example. Or if you want a more concrete example, imagine writing a hangman program. If you know the rules of hangman, you know that there's a word up there, right? And the player gets to name a letter. What the program would have to do then is take that letter and search the original word for that letter. So the program would have to search character by character through the hidden word to see if it could find that character. So anyway, separating strings into characters is useful, and that's why the character data type is useful. Just as a side note here, when using the data type character, you use single quotes. You will forget about that multiple times probably, and it will bother you. So just fair warning. There's nothing I can really do about that. Just prepare to be annoyed at some point. Not probably this week, but when we start writing more sophisticated programs involving strings of English, this will bother you. Finally, data type string is a data type for storing not just single letters, but just strings of English. English phrases, sentences, even paragraphs if you want to. That's what data type string is for. In contrast to character, you use double quotes when using strings. So you would write something like this: string, my sentence is hello class. Notice the double quotes. So when I say back here, single quotes will frustrate you, the way that students get frustrated is translating between character and string. Okay, so students get comfortable with strings more than characters, and they forget when you use characters, you're supposed to use single quotes and not double quotes. Okay, so this is how you can define a string. String sentence, hello class. There you go. That's now that string of English there. So the first thing you should know about strings is that cn doesn't work as you would expect. So let me show you how cn can work with character. So here I am back in my bare bones program. So once again, this is what you always start with, and we're going to type our code in main. So let me just start by showing you something with character. So let me just define a character variable. Let me get a character from the user, and then let me ask the computer what that was. Okay, so all this program is going to do is it's going to grab a character from the user, then it's going to print that character back. So this line of code here will just confirm that it got the character we think it got. Okay, so let's enter the dollar symbol. There you go, it printed it right back to me. Okay, so that's how we know that cin was working properly. This line of code here was supposed to grab whatever character I gave it, and we know that it did grab that because when I asked the computer, please print to the screen for me what you think my car is, it printed what we thought it should. All right, so we now know that a dollar symbol, a dollar sign symbol, was indeed placed in that my car variable. Okay, so now let's do something similar with strings. Let's do like string, my string, and let's cin my string. So let's let a user, and notice now it's yelling at me because my car is not declared anymore. So just a reminder that you can never use a variable until you declare it. So since I've erased it, my car is not declared anymore. The computer doesn't like that. Okay, so this code, if you look at it, it looks exactly the same as what I had a second ago. It's just that now I'm dealing with a string as opposed to a character. I'm getting the string, and then I'm going to ask the computer, please print to the screen for me what you think that string is. So let's run this. I'm going to type hello class. And when I hit enter, hello class is supposed to be placed in my string, and then the computer will output what it thinks happened. Notice the computer did not print to you hello class. It did not print that entire string to you. It only printed the word hello. So something has gone wrong here because I tried to put this string of English into my string right here, but the computer didn't record all that. It didn't record the space and then hello class. So let's just try this one more time and see what's happening. So let me hand it this string of English. This sentence, this class is great. Although maybe I'll put an exclamation mark, right? Because we're very excited about it. When I hit enter, that entire string of English is supposed to be put inside of my string when we get it using the cin command. Let's see if that happens. Oh, yeah. Okay, sorry, let's run this again. I don't know what it's doing. Let's just do this. Okay, good. I don't know what it was doing. Anyway, so when I enter a new string like this, it does exactly what happened before the last time it was working, which was that it forgot about the second word and the exclamation mark. Okay, so now let me just type again. Let me just type something with more words. I don't know why it didn't accept this a second ago. So I told it this class is great with much enthusiasm, right? The exclamation mark. It was supposed to place that in my string, but then when I asked the computer, what is my string? What's in there? Print to the screen what's in there. It only printed the first word. Okay. The reason this is happening is because cin will only read until the first space, and then it will stop. So when you tell it, get this string for me, the computer doesn't read this as get that string for me. It reads it as get whatever is in front of the first space for me. So it will always grab up to the first space and then stop. So if you use cin with strings, you're only going to get single words at most. You're only going to get stuff between spaces. But suppose you really want this string of English to be put inside of this string variable here. Maybe you really want this string to be, you could do it like this, I suppose, if you know that's what the user is going to do. And now let me get rid of this. Now if I ask the computer what's my string, it knows what it is because I hard-coded it in there, But if you actually want the user to give you something, how do you make sure you get all of that stuff? The answer is you use a command called getLine. And the syntax looks like this. This will get an entire line of text. So it will read until the user hits the enter button, the return button. So let's watch this one run. Now I'm going to tell it this class is great, and I'm even more enthusiastic now. This getLine now will read until a return symbol occurs. And that occurs precisely when I hit the return key, which I will do now. And now when I ask the computer to print that string for me, it prints the whole thing. That means that all of this stuff that I entered was actually placed inside of my string. So this is a common error for users to make when they are first using strings, to forget about this getLine thing here. But remember, if you ever want more than just a single word, you actually want a phrase or a sentence or whatever, and you want that entire sentence to be saved inside of the string variable, you must use this getLine command, not a cin command. Okay. The last thing I want to show you about strings, there's a little bit of obnoxiousness with this getLine command. So give me a number. So let's just suppose, for whatever reason, you want the user to give you a number and then give you a string. So give me a number followed by some English. Okay. So when I run this, what should happen is I should be able to enter a whole number, an integer, so like 4, and then once I'm done entering that, the computer moves right to the next line of code, so it should grab a string for me. Right? It should put my string of English into this myString variable. And so just to see what happens here, I'm going to have the computer, at the end of the code, print for me what it thinks X is, and then print for me what it thinks my string is. Okay, so let's stop it and then rerun it since I added some code. Okay, so I'm going to give it a number, and then I'm going to hit enter and put some English in there. Oh, but notice it won't even let me put English in there. Okay, that's odd, right? So I'm supposed to be able to give it a number right here, right? So like the number 6. Immediately after that, I'm supposed to give it a string. So suppose I want to enter 6 and then like this class is great again, Suppose I want to do that. The code's not letting me do it. It looks like it's just skipping this line of code, right? It looks like it's not even seeing this and just immediately giving you that integer back. Okay, so let's maybe actually change this code slightly and let it print the string first. Maybe that makes a difference. So I'm going to hand it a whole number, and then I'm going to hit enter and then try to give it a string. And then it should print that string to me and then print that integer to me. Okay, it doesn't work. So this is obnoxious, and this kind of issue came up all the time last semester when students were writing more sophisticated programs involving numeric data types and grabbing them from a user, and also using string data types to get English from the user. So what's really going on here is that when I run this code, the 6 does indeed go into the X, as we thought it should, right? And as we know it does, because the computer does print a 6 out. What happens next, though, is as soon as I hit the 6, to enter the 6, I have to hit the enter key. The enter key is actually a character in the computer's code, right? The computer sees the return key as a \n, essentially, as a new line. So that return key character gets put inside this string. So the reason it looks like it's not printing anything out is because it's just printing empty space. It's just printing a return key, essentially. But since that return key gets stored here, the computer is not skipping over this line. Okay, the computer is actually putting something inside that string. It's just putting nothing in there. It's not letting you put a string of English in there like you would like. So right here in the code, or in this output here, 6 gets put into X, and then enter gets put into string. That's what happened. That, of course, is kind of obnoxious because the way I wrote this code, I want to enter a number and then give it some English. The way you let that happen is right here, right before your getLine command. You use the command cin.ignore. What that does is it's ignoring that return key character, and it's not putting it inside the string, and then it's moving on. So now it will let you use some English here. So now I'm going to hit 6, enter. Now the code ignores that enter symbol, and now it's going to let me type some English and put it here inside of my string. So let me just do that. And now notice when I ask it to print my string, it does. High class. And then it immediately prints the integer next, right? There's no space there. I haven't told it to put a space in between my string and X. So in any case, cin is more complicated with strings. Sometimes you need to use this command before getLine in order to sort of clear things out, to clear out any floating return character or something. And you can't just use cn in general. You must use this getLine command. So getting strings from the user is sometimes more complicated than getting characters or numbers from a user, okay, because of these issues I just showed you. But in any case, if you ever are writing code and you're using this command and it seems like the computer is not putting things in there like you want, okay, the user says something and then the code doesn't seem to remember that, just stick a cn.ignore right above and that should hopefully clear up your issue. Okay, so back to this. Yeah, so generally, not always, if you only want single words and not sentences, it doesn't matter, but generally you will need to use the command getLine cn and then whatever the name of your string is to get a string of English, and sometimes you have to use cn.ignore before the getLine command. So at the end of this video, we now have, what, 7 data types? Excuse me, 7 data types. We have integer and long for storing whole numbers, float and double for storing decimals, Boolean variables for storing true and false, character variables to store single symbols, single letters, or like the @ symbol, and data type string to store actual strings of English, English phrases, sentences, etc. These are the 7 data types we will need for the course. So unless we really get far ahead of ourselves and move off into other territory, all of your variables will be of these types. And that's the conclusion of this video.